Determination will only take you only so far. And in terms of being a professional writer, the question is, how much are you willing to give up? Many people are always under the belief that it's a very simple thing to do. Just sit there and write and get paid. But what they don't realize a lot of times is the amount of effort and the amount of time in order to execute it. For myself, it's always been a running joke. If there's a film that looks pretty good that's going to be coming out to the theaters or even on streaming, 9 times out of 10 I'll have to wait and see when their DVD release is coming out, because I know if I'm working on a project that I'm going to be missing the premiere. And by the time I have everything up and ready and finished, it's already going to be either offline or out of the theaters. I don't mind. It's just the nature of the beast. Especially like here in the age of COVID, and between all the lockdowns and everything else, there's a lot of people that had to readjust and reacquaint themselves into working in an unfamiliar environment. Away from offices, away from people, things along those lines. But for myself, that was no big deal. I'm usually writing sometimes anywhere between 12 to 18 hours a day, depending on the situation, the circumstance, and what the subject entails. So for me, this whole lockdown thing has just been pretty much just another work day. And it's definitely been a little bit more different, obviously. Not very many people are using the telephone as often instead of Zoom and Skype, but that's all right, though, to each their own. I'm bringing all of this down just because of the fact that at the end of the day, it comes down to how much legwork do you want to put into this? How much oil do you want to put on that squeaky wheel in order to see it running properly? And so, for myself, as you can tell from some of the earlier notifications and such during the course of the opening of this video, that particular effort has always been a little bit of a struggle for me. But I've always made it a point to push forward. And even outside of high school and outside of my academic experience, I will have to say, without a doubt, first and foremost, I want to give thanks to somebody, a gentleman by the name of Fred Segustame. When my first book was published back in 2003, none of the bookstores wished to carry it. Even with local press covering it and everything else, they did not like the publishing company that had produced the book. Rather than panicking about it or anything along those lines, most of my friends will tell you that I've always been an out-of-the-box thinker. And, I'm also the type of person who's willing to give full support to whatever it is that I feel can use some extra effort, and especially if it's something dealing with somebody that I'm very close personal friends with. So in this case, Mr. Segustame used to have a little Latin supermarket in our town, in my hometown, and every morning I'd go in there and I would always have a cup of Cuban coffee and one of his wife's homemade empanadas. It was always a good way to kick off the day and make sure I had a little something on hand to motivate myself once I get back home and finish writing. So when the book finally came out, to my humbled amazement and still my absolute pride, Fred and his wife wanted to return the favor. And so not only did they host a book signing for me, but they turned it into a full wine and cheese tasting event. They actually had reached out through some of their networks and hired a flamenco player who flew into the United States from Peru for a one-night-only concert just for the customers and for the guests that I was bringing. And to say that it was a successful event was an understatement. was pleasantly surprised to tell you that the copies that I had on hand, which were roughly about 3 cases worth of books, sold within 15 minutes of what was going to be a 2-hour event. And so, it helped to be have a little team effort in that sense, as well as the extra effort and the motivation. And so, um, even down the road, other friends have helped and contributed, and have always made it a point to push me along and you know encourage me as much as I can. And probably one of the biggest advantages I've had with that would happen to be coming into early 2009, during a moment in my point in life that became one of my own darkest and most challenging of options. Um, Very ironic for somebody who really doesn't drink anything outside of coffee, and almost in a sense of history repeating itself. On New Year's Eve of 2009, I was actually hit by a drunk driver. And so, understandably, my whole left side of my leg and body were pretty much so sprained, shattered, broken, and a few other things. When the airbag deployed, that took out most of my upper teeth and chipped some of the jawline and everything else to that effect as well too. So while I was laying in bed and recovering with multiple casts and everything else to that effect, I had to hear one phrase that was a suggestion by the nurse that normally did not really work for me, and that was to just lay back, relax, and watch television. So instead of that, I went ahead and I forced myself into my wheelchair, and I pushed myself to the computer. And even though it was a little bit difficult, it took time, I went ahead and I used my working fingers and hands to try to punch out at least 3 articles, and I put out 1 book, and began working on the second volume of my Dragon's Bane series. So within that time frame as well, in the mornings I used to work at a warehouse. It was called Alliance Entertainment, and I still have lots of fond memories of it between some of my coworkers and my colleagues. And I was the only man in my department, and I was also one of the second youngest people within that particular department. And so my coworkers kind of saw me more as an adopted family member than anything else. And when I had to turn in and get the paperwork emailed over to say that unfortunately I wasn't going to be able to work the freights, or handle the hauls from the back of the trucks or anything like that anymore, uh, they in turn actually put some of their paycheck together, and they literally stopped by the house one morning, and I could tell I still get a little emotional about it, but it's just still a moment of pride, but also just bittersweet. But they came by the house, and they had pulled all their funds and out of their paycheck together, and kind of put a little rally point, and they bought me my first laptop computer, a printer, a scanner, a microphone so I could record things, and 3 different programs on writing, formatting, and editing that I can add into it if I needed it. And they told me to go out and go get that next book taken care of. So that's exactly what I did. By the summer of 2009, even though I was wearing a lot of pants and had to do a lot of covering up, in a matter of speaking, because I still had cast brace and things along those lines, I started my next round of book signing gigs, promoting my Dragonsbane series. And, you know, each time would either stand up for about at least a good 20 minutes to half an hour, sometimes longer, and depending on how much strength I had in my leg, and would just keep bucking through. So, it was painful, yes. Successful, yes. Memorable, beyond belief. It just, again, it boils down to how bad do you want this and what are you willing to do in order to achieve it. Now, I know you're probably wondering why exactly I'm sitting here and reflecting on these moments and kind of sharing some in-depth little tidbits and memories and reflections with all of you. And that's because things have taken a great major change in my creative sense. And I'm very, very pleased and humbled, but also still laughing in a lot of ways too. Because, again, looking back over the years, especially some of my friends that I went to high school with and middle school with when I was first breaking into my writing, we often had joked about everything from turning the Dragonsbane series into what we called Star Wars syndrome. And, Dragonsbane action figures, Dragonsbane t-shirts, Dragonsbane posters, animated series, movies, video games, everything else. And within the midst of all those joking, some of it has become reality. If you go to Itch.io, for example, you will find a game based off of the Dragonsbane series. Local archives, newspaper-wise, down here in South Florida, you'll find articles about my friend Paul Valdez and his band actually performing soundtrack to Dragonsbane. All of those jokes aside, and even some of those minor accomplishments have led me to this point in time, and I'm very pleased to say that in the professional writing sense, it is fellowship season. And for those of you who are not aware, this is the point in time where the networks and the studios are looking to fill the writing staff rooms. And so I've actually had the privilege to submit some of my movie scripts into the bigwigs. So I have submitted to Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, Netflix, even have been able to send a proposal to a few other top name directors as well as even pitched ideas to the heads of certain agencies and studio heads and representatives. And so, it's come full circle in so many ways. And has it been easy? No, of course not. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone behind each of my projects, but it has helped to bring me up to this point. It's the encouragement and the motivation of so many of my friends and colleagues that have also helped in balancing that effort and to help push me over to the next step. And so here we are. This is it. This is what I've been doing. This is one of the reasons why so many of you, from those in my friends list on Facebook, this is why I have not been able to answer to many of your text, messenger chats, or anything like that. For our friends that own the local businesses, this is why, precisely, I keep missing some of the events, and why 9 times out of 10 I'm having dinner at 4 o'clock in the morning before going off to bed. But I would still continue doing it. I will continue pushing forward. I don't mind. It's not very often that I can say that I have presented my work to these people. And I say that with absolute pride. And, it's just one of those things. I never really thought of the means of being able to do it before. I have two advantages there. One has been my education through Full Sail and the professors and instructors who you know, helped me along the way, even took time out of their day to help make sure that my own academic goals were not only achieved but also even enhanced in so many ways, showing me methods and little tips and everything else that helped me to reach what I needed to get done faster and effectively while still conveying my story. And even now, as I'm in my master class, not to be confused with masters, but my master class, on improving my writing, even through here, the opportunities that have presented themselves have been fantastic. And, it's been very, very moving but shocking and fun along the way to say that I've taken a movie script and I've just pitched it to Universal, or Warner Brothers just read my material. You know, these are all things that were at one point just random childhood jokes more than anything else, but it's become reality. You know, these goals have been reached. And so does that mean that I'm finished with everything? Absolutely not. That means that I've already outlined my next set of goals. I have my appointment planner here filled for the next 3 months of exactly what I intend to do with my writing, who I tend to reach out and to share it with, and also a little bit of some tips on what I will need to do in order to connect the bridge and make sure that everything looks good to go before I take it to the next step. Like they say, it's from this point on, it's onwards and upwards. And here's to the next venture, and here's to whatever lies down the road.